I've ridden a lot of new Harleys over the years since starting the channel, from the Breakout to the Fat Bob to the Lowrider S to the ST, the Heritage, and the Street Bob. Pretty much everything in their lineup I've ridden up to this point. But I recently got a chance to get on a 2002 Dyna Lowrider. And after 10 minutes, it really kind of struck me where the disconnect has come from Harley Davidson to its riders, especially over the past decade. And I want to compare and contrast that Dyna to the new Softails and tell you how there was not only a change from the Dyna to the Softails that upset riders, but there was something else there that disconnected the brand from the people that built it. I'm just going to give you my opinion, of course, and I want to hear yours, whatever it might be. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So let's look at what this Dyna is. Twin cam 88, I think that it's equivalent to a 1450cc engine before the 96 ever came out. So you're talking about 79 foot-pounds of torque. Of course, they didn't, list the horsepower ratings or anything like that. But a bunch of torque, rubber-mounted engine, twin shocks in the rear, of course, and pretty much a blank canvas to customize to your heart's desire. And whoever owned this bike did just that. By the way, big thanks to American Biker for letting me come out and actually ride this motorcycle and give my opinions on it. If you need anything, go talk to Rob up at American Biker. But you got the 5-gallon tank, you got the gauges right there on the tank where they kind of belong in the Dyna Softail series, of course. Mid-mounted controls, 5-speed transmission. And surprisingly, and maybe some of you guys that have ridden more of these older twin cam engines can tell me, I didn't get as much shake and vibration at idle as I was expecting. I think I've ridden one or two other twin cams, and one specifically I kind of saw what people talked about with those older engines, because it feels alive at idle and it starts to settle a little bit more when you get on the road. This one has, I think it's Memphis Shades Road Warrior type fairing on there. Very popular with these types of bikes, that West Coast styling and all that kind of stuff, club styling or whatever. T-bars, of course. Somebody put the little speaker pods in there and exhaust and et cetera, right? They just customized this thing and made this bike their own. And of course, this is what you do with Harley Davidsons, but specifically older Harleys. This is part of one of the good things with the new ones, but also one of the drawbacks that I'll kind of talk about here in a minute. But the bike was fairly smooth, had a decent amount of power, but you always felt like something was alive or going on with the motor or the bike itself. Whether it was a little bit of shake at idle or just whenever you got on the throttle, it was it's a fun bike to ride. Right? You get all of the performance out of what used to be, the biggest engine in their lineup in more of a smaller and lighter frame. Right? A lot of guys would take these bikes and do stunts and all kinds of stuff, right? So they're very fun. But it's also not like clinically smooth. And so that's one of the biggest things you'll notice about it. When I say there's a lot going on with it, right, you'll kind of get maybe a little bit of squat when you hit the throttle on this thing. And it's not precision smooth like you expect with the Softails. I mean, there's such a big difference between this bike and the Milwaukee 8. It's literally night and day. And so on paper, you take a machine like this that is not necessarily refined or anything like that, but just a lot of fun, and it feels like it's alive, kind of like what I talked about before. And then you have the Softail, refined, the balancer, the balance of the engine, very little to no vibration. You have the monoshock under the seat, so a much cleaner look, better suspension, not as hard whenever you are, or not as, maybe a little bit stiffer in the frame, but not as stiff in the suspension. So it's going to really help to suck up a lot of those, potholes and stuff on the newer Softails. This one, you're going to feel a little bit more of that. The throttle on the new Softails is smoother. The lean angle is probably a little bit better. 6-speed transmission, bigger engine, and just refined all the way around. And on paper, the Softail is better. More horsepower, bigger engine, smoother, faster, still accessorized to your heart's desire. So where is the disconnect here, right? You may be saying like, dude, we're talking about a night and day difference. So why would anybody go with one of these Dynas? But when the Dyna, came alive with the Sturgis and your wide glides, your super glides, your low riders, all of that in the 90s and 2000s, it became a real competitor in that space, right? A lot more power than what you would find in the Sportsters, of course, but a little bit more rowdy in a way than what you're going to get on your traditional baggers, especially at that time, where baggers were truly seen as old men motorcycles until the Street Glide kind of revolutionized that whole thing, and performance baggers now and all of that kind of stuff. So they're a lot closer, right? And baggers today, you can really have a lot of fun with them. I personally love the functionality and the way they ride and all that kind of stuff. The new baggers, of course. But this gave people an option to get the kind of torque and horsepower, customizability, and all of that kind of stuff that you would not get in a Sportster, minus the customizability, because obviously Sportsters, you can customize those too, but it just gave you a lot of options. They look good, and then TV shows too kind of made these things super iconic. I always talk about Sons of Anarchy, and that's not just an opinion, right? The Dynas, the lowriders, all of those bikes saw huge bumps in sales numbers after Sons of Anarchy, or while the show was going on. So now you have that all blacked out look, you have the wrapped pipes, you have the club style, the T-bars, the quarter fairings, the Memphis shades, all of this kind of stuff, and it became an entire subculture around one series of motorcycles. But again, even when you look at the bikes in Sons of Anarchy, they're not painted black from the factory. Those are wrapped pipes with, black exhaust wrap. It still has that kind of everyday working man, blue collar type of feel to the motorcycle when the rider that's on that bike spent the hours and time to customize it as well. No ABS for a lot of years, right? No safety features, no screen, no traction control and all that kind of stuff. It was you, the rider, and you got to make sure that you know how to ride that motorcycle, or you can get yourself in a bad situation. Or if you know how to ride that motorcycle, you have a little bit more freedom to do with it what you want. But let's be fair to the Softails. They are fantastic motorcycles. Better frame, stiffer frame, better cornering, safer motorcycles. I mean, technically on paper, you still have to know how to ride them. It's not like these new bikes just give you an all-out pass to be an idiot and not know how to ride your motorcycle. But if you get yourself or find yourself in a bad situation, there's a lot of technology there that can, and yes, maybe will break in the future and cost money, but could save your butt and keep you upright where one of the older bikes may not, right? Better suspension, better engine. Everything on paper is better. Now, of course, there was a big recall on the Softails, right? The preload adjuster tab could break, and that actually, could dig into the rear tire, could cause a blowout, any number of things. So they're not perfect, but better on paper for sure. But here's the culture shock. Harley went more corporate, less working man blue collar, which is what they built a reputation on. Now again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's not like they were ever giving these bikes away, let's just be honest. In the mid-2000s, they could pretty much charge you anything for a Harley Davidson. That's supply and demand at its finest, or worse, depending on how you look at it, of course. But they went to, let's make more money per motorcycle and just make less of them. That's totally fine. Let's focus on what's making the money instead of what's bringing people in the door. But also, when you go more corporate with a bunch of riders that are typically are not going to want anything to do with that corporate or kind of perfect or premium image, you're going to lose a lot of riders in the process. And I think that's where some of that culture shock came. I mean, I looked up stats from 2014 to 2023, and worldwide Harley sales were down like 39%. 2014 came the Rushmore project. A lot of great additions to the bikes, a lot of much needed refinements to the baggers, of course. But this whole transition to more perfect machines off of the factory floor has come at a cost as well, not only increased cost in the bikes, but at a cost of how riders feel way more disconnected from Harley Davidson than ever before. Not to mention the lack of entry-level bikes that really hasn't been at Harley Davidson now for a few years, and you just set yourself up to send a whole lot of new riders to Kawasaki or Yamaha or Honda and pretty much all of the other competition out there. Now, of course, we know they've made moves in the past couple of months to right this ship, new CEO, new dealer relationships and all that. But some of the damage has already been done and may be irreparable. And we've already talked about the things that Harley Davidson needs to do in order to succeed, or at least I've given you my opinion on that. But man, the contrast between what Harley used to be, by the way, it's not always just about the prices, because again, in the mid-2000s, people would pay almost anything for Harley Davidson. But if you walk into that dealer now, with the amount of competition that's out there and what the competition offers, sometimes at a much cheaper price, people aren't as married to the brand because they feel like the brand has basically separated more from them than them from the brand itself. And so I think a lot of riders feel like, hey, they've separated themselves from me. They want to go to a higher corporate, precise looking image. Then I'm going to take my business elsewhere. And then you don't have new bikes for riders to come in, and you've created a recipe for disaster. That's what this 2002 Dyna lowrider actually said to me about the state of Harley and the disconnect between it and its riders. That's just my opinion, though. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold 'em down.